Hey everybody, welcome to my new video. Let's go back to one of my most popular scenes, this little hacker room or arcade room or whatever you want to call it. So I thought let's create something smaller out of it so I can do a proper commentary over that. So we'll create some kind of mini arcade room or something with Atari and this arcade machine. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button to get notified when I release something new. And without further ado, let's get to it and let's get started. First of all, let's jump into empty Blender file and let's define our scene. So let's press Shift A, mesh and a plane. And about the size, I really want to go to 8x8 square that I'm used to. And it'll make the objects and the whole scale much bigger than it actually is, but I like to keep things consistent so I can use the similar like lighting values and stuff like that. So let's tab in and press S to scale. Let's enter 4 to scale it to 8x8. And right now we can go to the edge select mode by pressing 2, left click here and shift left click here, press E to extrude, Z, and then let's enter something like 5 or maybe 6 even. This will be a little bit higher up. Maybe we could go all the way up to 8 even. We'll see about how that looks. Yeah, that's a little bit too much, so we can correct that. Let's press G, Z and minus 1 to make it a little bit smaller. And right now we can use the ISOCAM. If you don't have the add-on, you can find the link in the description, download it. So you can find it right here, ISOCAM, and let's tab out of the edit mode. That's important if you want to use ISOCAM, and let's create the game ISOCAM. And right now we can modify resolution and move this up a little bit. So let's press G, Z, and by holding Control we can snap it, something like that. And I really like the scale of the room. The arcade will be really big here, so yeah, it will be just really a stylized representation of some really tiny room or something like that. Okay, and right now we can modify the camera settings a little bit, so let's go to 16 or even 18 orthographic scale. And with this setup we can continue with the modeling. So let's select our room object, tab in, select all by pressing A, and now press Alt E, extrude along normals, and let's extrude it outside. And we can enable S for even thickness, and right now we can enter something like 0.3 minus. Okay, and don't forget to check normals if you do something like that, because we extrude it in negative value, so maybe our normals are working correctly, because you can see. So if you press A to select all and Shift N, we flip the normals and they're now pointing correctly outside of these faces. So that's always nice to remember. Let's step out of this, so press tab to exit edit mode, and we can now create some pipes. I imagine this is some kind of basement room, so let's use one of these edges here. Tab into the edit mode, press 2, select the edge, press Shift D to duplicate, enter P and enter to separate. Right now we can tab out, select the new edge and tab in. And all we need to do is to modify this a little bit, so we can move it further away here. So press G, then X, move it somewhere here. Right now we can switch to the vertex select this one and move this by pressing double G. And we can now go to the top view and extrude this like here. And you can always go here and switch to the edge snapping. And right now if you press G then X and hold Control, you can snap this to the edge. Let's switch to the wireframe view so we can better see what's going on. And I want to select these two and move them a little bit here. And maybe we can now make some bevel here, so I'll select this vertex here, press Ctrl B, then V to enable vertex only, and adjust with the mouse wheel, do something like this. Okay. Right now we can tab out and convert this to curve, and you can find the option here, convert to curve from mesh and text. But I added this to quick favorite, so if I press Q, I have an option to do that much faster. And right here, I want you to find the geometry settings and adjust the depth of the bevel. Let's switch to solid view, and here you can get a nice looking pipe right away, and we can lower the resolution to 3, make it maybe a little bit thicker, and move this a little bit down. And we can do this in the edit mode, so the origin point stays in the middle of the room. So let's tab in, select all, G then Z, and move this down. And of course we can duplicate this, so Shift D, Z, duplicate and create a new one. And if you want to have some variation there, you can press Alt S and reduce the radius for these separate points. So if you now tab out, they will scale accordingly. We can now tab out, select the room object, select this edge and duplicate that one. So Shift D, P to separate, select the new object. Let's go into the edit mode, press A to select all, move it somewhere here, and we can duplicate this, G then Y, and move it here. And I want some other pipes here going along the wall, so let's tab out, Q, curve from mesh, go to the geometry, and let's add some bevel. And we can go to the resolution of 2 and move this out a little bit. So go to the wireframe view, press G then X, and move it out. And now we can modify this as well, so it doesn't get in the way. And here we can leave it as it was. Okay, so let's get back to the solid view, tab out, and this is the base for our room, and we can now proceed to model some arcade machine. We can start by creating a plane here where the arcade machine will be located, so shift right click there, let's press Shift A and create a plane. We can now scale this out a little bit, so tab in, press S and scale this, something like that. And we don't need all this geometry, so go to the edge select, select this one, press E and edges, and press X and vertices. So we only have this one edge left. We can now press 1 to go to the front view, wireframe view, 1 to go to the vertex select. We can now extrude some arcade shape. So select this one, press E, Z, and drag this up, something like this. And we can now extrude the simple shape, so press E, drag it here. So we'll just eyeball some approximate shape for an arcade. And we can now close this like that. And actually we don't need this one, so let's press X and delete the vert. Let's join these two by pressing F, and then we can scale them on the X. So S and X 0. And move them out a little bit. So I guess this will work as a shape for the arcade machine. Right now we can just press E and extrude this on the Y, and maybe we can make it even taller, but we can tab out, scale this, because we have a pivot point down there, maybe not so much, and press Ctrl A and apply scale. So this will be the base for our machine. Right now we can just, with still this edge loop selected, we can press F to close it, and alt click here to select this loop and close that one as well. Select all and Shift N to consolidate normals. That's always like a good thing to do. Let's zoom in a little bit, or you can press the period key on the numpad to focus on your object. And I want to create some kind of edge here that goes out, so let's add a loop, and we can add two. I really don't want to do this in the mirror mode. I don't think that will be necessary, so let's scale it up like that. Right now we can go to the face select by pressing 3, select this one, control click here, shift click here, and just select this loop. And right now we can Alt E, extrude faces along normals, extrude this a little bit. We can press S for even thickness, and smooth it out by holding shift like that. And right now we can select these two faces. Let's press I to inset, Alt E, and extrude along normals a little bit inside to give it some structure. And we can do similar things here, here, and here. So shift click these three faces. Let's press I and inset, Alt E, and extrude along normals a little bit inside. Okay, and we can now select this one here, Control plus to expand the selection, and we can scale it down a little bit. Okay, that's just fine. If you want to do some curvature here for the screen, you can just press I and extrude this and move a little bit on the X. Okay, and now we'll create some controls. So tab out, shift right click here, add new mesh, plane. Let's scale this down a little bit. Can zoom in, and let's extrude this. Inset and extrude. We can now snap the cursor to the new face, so Shift S, cursor to select it, and we can tab out. Let's press Shift A, add a circle. We can modify the number of vertices to something like 8. Let's tab in, let's scale this down, so there'll be some kind of joystick or a stick or something. So let's press F to fill it up and extrude, and we can now select all, press S and Shift Z to scale this down a little bit, and select this top face, Shift S, cursor to select it. And we can add some round cube. If you don't have that option, I think you need to enable extra objects add-on in the preferences. And let's scale this down, so this way we can create like a simple stick, and we can join this to this object. So select them all and Control J. And if you want to snap this to the surface, you can just enable face snapping with aligning rotation and projection of individual elements. Press G, and if you hold Control, it'll snap, or you can enable and disable the snapping right here. Right now I want to add some buttons there, and maybe they can be part of this object as well, so we keep things simple in the outliner there. Yeah, first of all, let's just Shift right click here, press Shift A, add a plane, scale it down. Right now we can tab out, press G, hold Control to snap this, tab right back in, extrude, and scale this down. And right now, since the object is rotated, we can press G and Z twice to move in the local coordinates of the object, and we can maybe do some structural changes here. And let's try to add the array modifier. Let's create like 3 copies of the object, and maybe set the offset to 1.1. Let's try to scale it up, and I think this will work nicely. So you can again press G, by holding Control you can snap it here. And if you want to have it as a part of this object, you can always apply the array modifier and join it, but I will leave it like this, and I will just shift click here, press Alt D to create a link duplicate, press Y, and move it. So yeah, that's about the controls. I think the sticks are a little bit too large, so let's just press L, and once again here we can now snap the cursor to selection and select the 3D cursor as a manipulation origin and scale this down a little bit. I think this will do. So let's tab out. I want to switch back to the medium point. And basically the arcade is ready right now. There'll be some texture applying later, but in terms of modeling, I think this will do nicely. So we can move to some more objects here and create like a table with Atari and the TV. Right now we can create a table here, so press Shift right click to move the cursor there, press Shift A, plane, and let's scale this up on the X, so let's press S and X and scale this out a little bit, maybe on the Y-axis as well. Let's move this up a little bit in the edit mode so the origin point stays at the bottom there, so something like this. Right now we can eyeball it and maybe come back to it a little bit later. And let's press E and extrude a table. Now let's step out, let's press Shift A, add a plane, S, and scale this down. This will be a leg for our table, so we can now go to the top view by pressing 7, go to the wireframe view, move this here, maybe scale this down even a little bit more, go to the front view, and let's extrude this. Okay, and since the origin point stayed in the middle there, we can now just add the mirror modifier on the X and Y axis, and we have a simple table. And right now we can create some kind of TV there, and Atari and controller. So yeah, let's Shift right click on the table there, let's add a plane. You can see this is very simple box modeling, and basically we are always starting either with a cube or circle or a plane or something like that, so nothing too fancy here. And right now we can extrude this, and we can make the TV a little bit larger. Let's apply the scale, and maybe we can now go to the front view, move it up a little bit, select the bottom face, let's do an inset, extrude it down. Okay, and right now I want to create a screen here and some buttons and stuff, but I don't want to subdivide the whole cube. And since we are staying in the flat shaded low poly mode here, we can just separate the face as we please. So let's select the face here, let's press P, then separate, so we can see it's now a separate object. And we can now subdivide this and move to the right. I think the proportions are a little bit off, so maybe we can select both of these objects, select all, and scale this the X a little bit like that. I think that's more like it. And right now we can do the same thing. We can just select the face and press P to separate it to a new object, and we can now insert this and extrude inside, scale this to create a little bit of a slope there. And we can do some kind of curvature there, so Ctrl R to make a cut, one more here. As you can see, this is really simple to do since that's a completely separate object. We can now select these edges there and scale them, but we don't want to scale on the Y-axis, so let's press S and Shift Y to exclude that and scale this out. Okay, and we can now select these four, do an inset, and push this out a little bit. So G, Y, So we have a simple TV shape, and right now we can do some cut here, move it down, make an inset here. There'll be like a place for some lights or something, and we can do some channel buttons up here. So we can do another cut, select this, but I want the buttons to be separate objects as well, so let's press Shift D right now, P to separate, and we can scale this down, maybe move into position a little bit more, like that. And right now we can subdivide maybe twice. Let's press I and I again to inset this individually. And right now we can just press Ctrl I and delete these faces, so we have like a nice buttons. Press E to extrude, and if you now switch the manipulation to individual origins or the pivot point, you can scale these separately and create nice buttons there. And we can tab out now and go to the original object and maybe do some inset here. Select these edges by holding Shift. Let's switch back to the median point, scale them like that and extrude a little bit inside, and now we can move this inside as well. And here we can just place some kind of plane there, rotate it on the X, so RX 90, scale it down and create some lights. And you can press L hovering over that to select that, and Shift D and X to duplicate. So yeah, that's basically the TV. Maybe if you want to add some more structure to that, you can like extrude this a little bit or something. But I like it flat right now, so let's just select all of these objects, and with the large TV object as a last one, let's press Ctrl P and parent with keep transformation, so you can manipulate this and rotate it around. So let's place it somewhere like this. And right now I want to create some kind of vintage 80s gaming console, so something like Atari 2600 or something like that. So let's shift right click here, let's create a plane. We can scale this down, scale on the X and extrude. And this will be a very simple model that there's really not much going on here to create something like a gaming console. So let's just scale this on the Y. Okay, and we can now maybe scale these edges and maybe bevel them a little bit with just 3 subdivisions. And we can inset this, disable individual origins and extrude along normals. Let's press S. So yeah, this will be some kind of a basic gaming console. Right now we just need to create some controls over here and some hole for a cartridge. So we can apply the same principle as with the TV. We can just separate this panel and chop it up a little bit. So Ctrl R to create a loop cut. Right now we can inset this, extrude down, inset once again and extrude out, so it actually looks like there's cartridge, insert it, and we can bevel this with just one subdivision so it has some kind of structure there. And right now, if you don't want to do the double work, we can cut it in the middle, toggle X-ray, delete all of these vertices and enable mirror modifier, and we can create some controls here. So let's do 2 cuts like that, and with the cuts and with the edges still active, we can now bevel. Press I to inset and extrude downwards. Okay, and right now you can select one of these faces. Let's toggle X-ray back, add a cursor there. Let's press Shift A, create a circle. 6 subdivisions will be enough. Let's scale this down, press F, then E. Let's create a simple control like that. Right now we can look from the side, rotate this. Yeah, so basically that's it, and we can now just Alt D and duplicate that. Okay, and here as well. And we can now go to the edit mode here and separate this panel as well. I want to have it some texture there, so let's press Ctrl R, create these loop cuts. I think like 7 will be totally enough, and we can now bevel these with just one subdivision and extrude downwards. So that will create some nice structure, and this could look like a nice gaming console. Right now we can just select all of these objects here with this one as last, press Ctrl P and parent it so it can be freely moved around. So let's move it a little bit back here, R then Z, rotate it, and maybe we can now have a look and scale it a little bit, because this is like a really stylized micro room, so we don't really need some exact proportions. And right now I want to parent this as well, so this can be scaled as well, and we can parent these 2 objects to this as well. So right now we can scale the whole table and move it around. And again, try to eyeball it a little bit. You don't need to be that precise. Again, you can just look at it as a whole scene and adjust the proportions as you will. Okay, and right now I want to create some controller here. So zoom in, shift right click to place the cursor there, create a plane. Let's scale it down. Extrude. Right now we can set this, and let's subdivide this, and let's use loop tools. So let's right click, loop tools, and circle. And if you don't have loop tools enabled, it's really simple. Just go to preferences, add-ons, search for loop tools and enable them. Right now we can scale this out, extrude down, and if you wish, you can just remove these faces, select the loop down here and fill with n-gon, so it's a little bit more simple. Right now we can inset, extrude out, and do several of these extrudes and insets to create some kind of a rubber stick cover. Okay, that'll be fine, I think. And at last you can extrude the stick itself. Maybe do it like this. one more extrusion, scale it out, and extrude. You can always press Ctrl plus to select all of this and, you know, scale it in place. And to make the shape a little bit more interesting, you can press Ctrl Alt here to select these edges, press Ctrl B to bevel, and add some bevel to those corners. Okay, and maybe if we enable X-ray, we can select these vertices and move it down a little bit. Okay, I think they'll work nicely as a control. And right now I want to shift right click here, create a circle there with 12 subdivisions, make it smaller, press F to fill and extrude. So we have a button there, maybe not that high. Okay, and let's parent that to the stick and the stick to the table. So we now can move all of that. Okay, I think this will work nicely as a base for our scene, so we can move to creating some materials and actually to proceed with some lighting. And right now I just realized that I made a mistake here when I scaled this. It wasn't parented, so we can now just press Alt S to reset the scale to its original value, and let's select these objects and parent them to the machine. And right now we can scale this no problem. Okay, so let's go to the camera view and let's select and let's press Shift S, cursor to world origin, add a plane that will serve as our background, and we can now look from the front and move this down a little bit. Okay, and I've prepared some of the textures for the scene because I think the colors itself wouldn't be enough. There will be of course some lights and some emission materials to make things interesting, but I think the scene can benefit much more from an actual textures. So I looked up some screens for games like Space Invaders and Pac-Man and some like poster material, but it wasn't that easy because I really need to think about licensing here, and you should too. So if you're doing a scene just for yourself and you're experimenting with stuff, you can use whatever you find on the Google Images and stuff. But once you're actually like doing a video for YouTube, or you want to put out the scene there for download and you're putting out that content, you need to think about the licensing, and you need to find some materials that if you want to use them and redistribute them, they have to be free or Creative Commons or something like that. Flickr can be a very good tool for looking up some images that I have Creative Commons licenses. So you can find all the links in the description for the material I will be using here. So we are clear, but I just wanted to mention this. If you really want to put your content out there, it's always good to think about licensing and giving the proper attribution to your sources. Before we proceed, I want to add some volume to those tubes. So let's add a solidify modifier there so they actually have some thickness. And they can be open. I don't see a problem in that, that it's some kind of a cutout of a scene, but let's give it some actual thickness. And right now we can switch to the shading and select our room object. Let's call that room, and we can add a material there. Let's call it wall, and that can be like dark brown material, something that the basement wall would have, but I want to create a different material here, and let's call that floor. And I want it to have a checkered texture, and it's very easy to do that here in Nodes. So just press Shift A and go to the texture and search for checkered texture, and you can just connect it to the base color. And of course we need to go and assign that material, so select this face and assign the floor, and you can see right away you get a nice checker texture for free. So we can now proceed to these tubes. Let's call them tubes or pipes, whatever you want. And let's create a new material. Let's call that metal. And I want to bring up the metallic and maybe a little bit darker color, but I think this will do for now. So let's add a metal texture there. And here I want to create a background material. Let's just make it really dark for now. We can call the plane background, and we don't have to go very deep with naming objects since we have them parented. So right now we can just call this table, and this one can be arcade, and that'll do for now. So let's just add some black material to the arcade, some light wooden material to the table, and the same black material to the console as well, and here as well. I think Atari had like a wooden material there or something, so maybe we can assign that here. And the metal to these. Here we can go with the black material as well. Create the red material for the button. Maybe we can make it like glow or something later, but I don't think these joysticks had a glowing buttons back then. Okay, and now this can be gray, so let's give it a gray color, and the black here as well. Don't worry about the screen right now, there'll be different material, but we can actually prepare the material slot. So press Ctrl+ to expand, create a new material. Let's call this TV screen. Let's click assign, so we have it prepared, and we can do the same stuff here for the arcade. So let's create arcade screen and assign, and right here we can give a black material to those. Press L, select the whole island and give it the red material here, and maybe these buttons can be glowing actually, so let's call this glow. Let's switch from principled to the emission shader. Let's give it some nice yellow color, almost green maybe, and give it some nice emission. And we can do the same for these two. Okay, so this will serve nicely as a base for our scene, and I wanted the arcade to have like glowing stripes there that will really make all the difference. So let's select those. But be careful when you're using control click, the pathfinder can be quirky sometimes. Okay, and right now create a new slot. Let's call this glow, and I want to have a little bit different color, so let's switch to emission, select the green color, like the really green, ramp up the emission it like that. Okay, we can of course modify that later. So right now we can proceed to adding those textures. Okay, so I have some of these textures prepared here. So let's select the arcade screen and let's drag the texture here and connect it to color. We'll see what will that do. It didn't do much, so let's go to the UV editing. Let's open the image so we actually see what's happening there. And we can now select the screen area, press U and unwrap. And as you can see, it nicely matched our image. Of course, the proportions are a little bit better, so you can decide here whether you want to just move this around. And you can see that it's actually flipped, so we can rotate this 180 degrees. And I prefer to scale this because we didn't think much about the proportions of the screen before. So right now we can just scale this out. Okay, like that. So you will see there's a screen there. And of course you can go back to the shading and maybe switch this principled shader to emission shader. So let's add, where are you, shaders? Emission shader, and connect this. And we can like make emission of 2. Okay, and we'll do the same stuff for the TV. So we can delete the principled right away and add that emission shader here. And drag the second texture, connect it, go into the edit mode. Let's look at that. You can press U to unwrap, and you can see the rotation is a little bit weird. So what you can do is to actually reset the rotation here. Look from the front, press U and project from view, and you would get the same exact shape here. Of course, we want to switch this to the actual image that's going on there. And we can move this. And I only found the square texture with a Pac-Man, so we'll just distort it a little bit. Right now we can go back to shading and maybe adjust that strength. Okay, maybe make this a little bit smaller. Okay, I really like that. We can now rotate this back into place. And one last thing, I wanted to have a logo, glowing logo here, and it was really hard to find something which would actually say Space Invaders. I didn't have time to make something on my own, so I actually found something that's public domain, and the link is in the description, so you can use that. It should be a transparent PNG. So let's create a new material slot here. Let's call this logo and assign here. Right now we can create an emission shader again and drag it into the scene, and let's see how that looks. Let's switch to the logo and let's press U and unwrap. Okay, so you can see this is a little bit off, so we can rotate this 90 degrees, move this into place, scale it up, and we can of course go to the shading view, change the properties on the texture, and we can select the clip instead of repeat, and that would actually made it has only one image in place, so we can now freely scale this and place. Okay, and right now we can bring this up to something like 4 or 5. Okay, and now it'll be all about lights, so let's switch to the material preview and enable scene lights and scene world. This is not looking like much right now, and we can go to the render settings, enable occlusion, bloom and screen space reflection, and this is already much better. And I want the final render to be Eevee, because I really like that cartoonish flat shading going on there, and really just the subtle shadows that Eevee produces, which are not that realistic like with cycles. So let's bring in some more lights and we can finish this. Okay, let's create the first light. So Shift A, light, and create area light, and there'll be like the main light for the room that's actually on the ceiling, so we can move it here. Let's scale this up a little bit, and we can now set it to like 150 watts, so it actually gives some light. And I want it to have a little bit of a purple shade, so I want to have a little bit more blue in that light. So something like this. Okay, and maybe here just outside of this clipped area there's something like a wall lamp or something, so we can actually bring in some point lights here, maybe even stronger, place them maybe a little bit outside of this, like that, and set the color to something orange. And I think this is like too strong, so let's bring it down to 250 and move it more into place, like that, just to balance that light a little bit. And we can now bring in some more of that blue light as a world ambience. And now we can get a little bit creative. So we can like go and place some point lights here behind the wall and make them like a really strong lights. Maybe something strong violet. If you look from the front, you can see it will give some nice gradients outside of the scene. You can maybe duplicate this and create some pink light there. Okay, so you get the idea. Basically, we are trying to create some 80s looking color scheme, and it's always good to have some kind of like pink or violet light in there, and to balance it out with the strong neons like a green one here. Of course, let's try to bring some exposure here into the mix, something like 1.5 and a little bit more contrast. And I really miss some object here to balance out the composition, and color wise I really miss some strong red accent there. So I will probably bring the chair from the first scene I made. You can watch the video how I made that chair. I will link that in the description, or you can go to my Patreon, which is kind of a new thing. I've placed all of the scenes there to download. There are like 100+ scenes right now. All of the YouTube scenes that I've made are there So for $7 a month you can have access to everything I make. You can download it, you can play around, look at how I make my lighting and all that stuff. So yeah, I would definitely recommend to do that if you want to see how I make my scenes and play around with them a little bit. So I just opened one of them and copy pasted the object from the scene here, and we can now move it around, scale it a little bit and finish this. And you can see right away how something like one object can make all the difference when it comes to like a composition, balance and the colors. And this looks much better in my opinion right now. And one last thing I miss here is some kind of poster or picture on the wall. So I will just shift right click here and bring in images as planes, and I have this picture prepared that's kind of a 80s style image with that pink and blue lighting and the grids and all that good stuff. So let's just move it a little bit so it doesn't collide with the face there, and we can just move it here in place so it gives a little bit more interest to the scene. And you can now play with some more objects. Okay, so that's it for like a mini arcade scene that's heavily inspired by the hacker room I've made before. I hope you like it. There were a lot of you asking for commentary instructions for this kind of scene. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you're new to the channel and you like this kind of tutorials, please hit that subscribe button and that bell button so you get notified when I release something new. Thank you all for watching and have a wonderful day.